Stay with me, she whispered. Nowhere else I'd be, he growled. Holding her close, Elena had always prided herself on being independent. Life had taught her, in small and painful ways, that relying on anyone could end in disappointment. After her recent breakup, she had buried herself in work, in long walks at night, and in quiet routines that left no room for uncertainty. But that night was different. She had stayed late at the office, trying to finish a report that refused to come together. The streets were nearly empty, the city lights flickering lazily in the drizzle that had started hours before. She stepped out of her car to check something when she realized, with a sinking feeling, that it wouldn't start. She twisted the key over and over, but the engine refused to respond. A cold shiver ran down her spine as the wind picked up, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the faint scent of rain-drenched trees. She pulled her coat tighter, her heels clicking nervously on the pavement as she tried to figure out her next move. In moments like this, Elena usually kept her head down and handled things herself, but tonight the situation felt heavier. She had no one to call, her phone's battery hovering around 10%. She considered calling a cab, but in her neighborhood, late-night rides were expensive, and waiting outside in the drizzle felt unsafe. She sighed and began walking toward the main road, hoping to find someone who could help. The street was quiet except for the distant hum of a few cars. That's when she noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost a little ahead. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a dark jacket that seemed soaked from the drizzle. Elena hesitated, debating whether to approach him. Something in his calm posture, though, made her feel a little less anxious than she had moments ago. "Excuse me," she called out, trying to sound casual. "Could you... my car won't start. Could you help me?" The man pushed himself upright and walked toward her. There was a quiet strength in his movements, a natural confidence that wasn't loud or aggressive. "Of course," he said, his voice low but steady. "Do you want me to take a look?" "Yes, please," Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped aside as he approached her car. He crouched near the hood, examining it with a careful, practiced eye. She watched him for a moment, noting the way his brow furrowed in concentration and how he handled each tool without hesitation. There was a patience in him that seemed almost foreign to her, a calmness she hadn't felt in a long time. After a few minutes, he straightened and looked at her. "Your battery is dead. I can give you a jump, but you should have it checked tomorrow. Do you have cables?" Elena nodded, pulling them from the trunk. As he connected the cables, they exchanged small talk. She learned his name was Marcus, and he worked nearby. He didn't ask too many questions about her, but when he did speak, it was with an interest that felt genuine, not prying. The engine roared to life under his careful hands. Elena couldn't help the relief that washed over her. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. I don't know what I would have done without you." Marcus shrugged lightly, but there was a hint of a smile. "It's no problem."
Everyone needs help sometimes. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the rain tapping on the car roof.
There was a strange sense of ease between them, an unspoken understanding that didn't need words. Elena felt a tug of curiosity about this man who seemed so ordinary, yet so reliable.
"You're lucky it wasn't worse," he said, glancing at the dark street. "It's not safe to be out here alone at night." Elena nodded, feeling the truth in his words.
She usually avoided moments like these, relying only on herself. But tonight, she realized, she didn't mind being dependent, even for a little while. I guess I should get going," she said, her voice hesitant. "But thank you." "Really?" Marcus nodded. "Take care, and don't worry too much about tonight." Everything's fine now. She smiled faintly and started toward her car. Then she stopped, turning back slightly. I hope I see you again, she said. Almost afraid she sounded too forward. He met her gaze steadily. Maybe you will, he replied simply, his voice carrying a quiet promise. As she drove away, Elena's mind wandered. There was something in the way he had held himself, in the way he had helped without asking questions, that left an impression she couldn't shake. It was rare, she thought, to meet someone who felt like a safe harbor in the middle of a storm, and for reasons she didn't fully understand, she wanted to see him again. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the events over and over, the soft hum of the engine, the rain against the windshield, the brief moments of conversation that had felt surprisingly natural. She realized that it wasn't just the help she remembered. It was the sense of calm he had brought into her chaos, the feeling that someone else could be trusted. Marcus, on the other hand, returned home quietly. The night had been simple, but something about the woman in the soaked coat lingered in his mind. There was a kind of strength in her vulnerability, a resilience that didn't demand attention but naturally drew it. He found himself thinking about her as he went through the motions of his evening, wondering what the next encounter might bring. Days passed, and Elena tried to ignore the memory. Life had a way of moving forward, of filling moments with work, errands, and routines. But when she walked past the same parking lot a week later, she noticed Marcus again. He was leaning against a lamppost in the same quiet way, watching the rain. For a moment neither spoke, just observing each other. And then, almost instinctively, they smiled. It was a simple smile, but it carried a weight of recognition, of shared understanding that words could not capture. Elena felt her heart lift in a way it hadn't in a long time. Here was someone who didn't demand anything from her, yet seemed willing to give support without hesitation. She realized that this was rare, almost too rare, and she wanted to explore what it meant. Marcus's expression softened as he watched her. There was no grand gesture, no rush, no expectation, just presence. And in that presence, Elena found a warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. The memory of that first night, the fear, the uncertainty, and the relief, suddenly felt like the start of something meaningful. As the week unfolded, fate seemed to conspire to bring them together. A shared encounter at a cafe, a brief conversation at the grocery store, and casual nods in the park. All small, ordinary moments, but they added up. Each time, Elena found herself drawn to his quiet strength, and Marcus felt the same pull. They didn't speak of it directly, didn't name the connection, but both felt its weight, subtle but undeniable. The night ended with Elena reflecting on how unexpected life could be. A random moment, a dead car battery, a stranger who stayed calm when she was panicked. It had created a spark neither of them could ignore. And in that spark there was a quiet hope that life, despite its disappointments, still held surprises worth embracing. Elena curled up in bed that night, her thoughts lingering on Marcus. She realized that the world could be harsh and lonely, but that didn't mean it was impossible to find someone who made the chaos feel less frightening. And perhaps, she thought as her eyes finally closed, sometimes the universe sent exactly the person you needed when you least expected it. The next few weeks passed slowly, but in a way that Elena hadn't expected. Life, with its usual rhythm of work, errands, and quiet evenings, seemed a little brighter after that night with Marcus. She didn't see him every day, and they didn't talk constantly, but every encounter left a small impression that lingered in her mind. Sometimes it was a nod across a street, sometimes a brief conversation at the coffee shop, and sometimes just the knowledge that he was nearby, moving in the same city, existing in the same world. One rainy afternoon, Elena found herself at the little cafe where she often stopped to grab coffee after work. The place was quiet, filled with the smell of baked goods and strong espresso. She scanned the tables, her eyes catching on a familiar figure sitting near the window. Marcus. He had his laptop open and a cup of coffee in front of him, his focus on the screen. But the moment their eyes met, a small, almost shy smile appeared on his face. Elena felt a flutter of warmth in her chest. She hadn't expected to see him today, and yet here he was, quietly present, as if fate had planned it. She walked toward him, her steps cautious but confident. "Hi," she said softly.
Marcus looked up, closing his laptop.
"Hi," he replied. His voice was steady, warm, and familiar, like a melody she had already started to hum without realizing it. "Come, sit." They spent the next hour talking about ordinary things: work, the weather, books they had read, movies they liked. But each word carried a subtle weight. There was no rush, no need to impress. Their conversation flowed naturally, with pauses that didn't feel awkward, but comfortable. Elena noticed small details she hadn't before. The way his fingers tapped gently on the table when he thought, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he cared about, and the quiet patience he carried with every response. Marcus noticed her in ways he hadn't expected either. There was a gentle intensity in her presence, a mix of caution and curiosity, strength and vulnerability. He found himself leaning in slightly when she spoke, not to intrude but to listen more carefully. He didn't ask too many questions about her personal life, but he asked enough to show that he genuinely wanted to understand her. After coffee, they stepped outside into the drizzle, umbrellas in hand. The city had a soft, reflective glow from the wet streets and the dimmed streetlights. Elena laughed softly when a puddle splashed near her feet. Marcus smiled, instinctively stepping closer to shield her from the splash. It was a small gesture, unnoticed by anyone else, but it felt significant to both of them. "You're always so careful," Marcus said, his tone gentle, teasing slightly. "I think it's part of your charm." Elena looked up at him, surprised by the compliment. She was used to people either dismissing her caution or taking it for granted, but Marcus said it like it mattered. "Maybe," she replied with a small smile. "Or maybe I just don't want to get hurt again." He studied her for a moment, understanding in his gaze. "I get that," he said quietly. "I think we both learned that the hard way." There was a pause between them, filled with the rhythm of rain on umbrellas and distant traffic. Neither rushed to fill it, and yet it felt charged with meaning. Elena realized that this quiet, ordinary moment was as significant as any grand gesture she could imagine. Over the next several days, their encounters continued to accumulate, small but meaningful. A shared table at the cafe, brief conversations outside the office, occasional texts checking in on each other. The words were simple, but each one built trust and connection. Elena found herself thinking about Marcus during the day, wondering what he was doing, hoping he was well. Marcus found himself noticing the little things about her, the way she smiled at strangers, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated, the softness in her voice when she let her guard down. One evening, as they walked together after grabbing dinner, the city quiet except for occasional cars, Marcus spoke in a low voice. "Do you ever think about how strange it is, meeting someone like this? Unexpected, out of nowhere?" Elena nodded.
Yes.
"I usually try to avoid things like that, but with you it feels different." "Different how?" he asked, curiosity in his tone. "Safe," she admitted after a moment. "Like I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. And, I don't know, I feel calm." Marcus didn't respond immediately, just walked beside her, letting her words settle. He understood completely. "I feel the same," he said finally. "It's rare to find someone you can just be with without all the noise." Their steps slowed as they approached a quiet park. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, casting a soft glow around them. Marcus glanced at her, noticing how the dim light softened her features, how her eyes reflected the city around them. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had grown comfortable but still cautious between them. Elena felt the same impulse. She wanted to close the distance, to reach for the connection she had started to trust. But there was a hesitation, a mutual respect for the boundaries they had set. So they walked side by side, shoulders occasionally brushing, letting the warmth of their presence speak louder than words. As they reached the park bench, Marcus stopped and looked at her seriously. "Elena, I know we're just getting to know each other, but I want you to know something. I like spending time with you." "More than I thought I could." Elena's breath caught slightly. She hadn't expected him to be so direct, but the sincerity in his eyes made her heart beat faster. I like spending time with you, too," she admitted. "I wasn't sure at first, but now I do." The moment lingered, charged with a quiet intensity. It wasn't a declaration of love. Not yet. It was something softer, more real. The recognition that they both felt something significant, something worth exploring. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. The walk back, the shared umbrella, the comfortable silence, and the small smiles carried all the weight that needed to be carried. Both knew this was only the beginning, and yet it felt like a meaningful step forward. The next morning, Elena woke with a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in months. The world didn't seem as heavy, the routines didn't feel as monotonous, and the memories of that night kept replaying in a gentle loop. She smiled to herself as she sipped her coffee, thinking about Marcus and the way he had made her feel understood without judgment. Marcus, meanwhile, returned to his usual schedule with a new sense of anticipation. Each interaction with Elena was becoming a highlight, a moment to look forward to in his otherwise busy, orderly life. He found himself replaying their walks, their conversations, the small shared laughs. The connection was growing, subtle but undeniable, and he wanted to nurture it carefully, without rushing or forcing it. A few days later, they met again at the same cafe, this time by chance, or perhaps by quiet design. They shared a table, ordered their usual drinks, and fell into conversation as easily as if no time had passed. This time they spoke more openly about their lives, their past struggles, and their hopes. Elena shared a story about her childhood neighborhood, about the small victories and disappointments she had faced growing up. Marcus listened, genuinely interested, occasionally sharing his own experiences. Through the simple act of listening and sharing, they built a foundation of trust. It was quiet and slow, but it was real. There was no rush, no pressure, only the understanding that each meeting mattered, that each word and gesture added to the bond between them. By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the cafe and the streets outside, they both knew something important was happening. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no fireworks or declarations. It was in the way their eyes met, in the small smiles, in the comfort of being near each other. It was the quiet certainty that, no matter what life had thrown at them before, they had found a connection worth exploring. And in that certainty, Elena realized she was no longer afraid of being vulnerable. Marcus realized he no longer wanted to hide his feelings. They didn't need to say it out loud yet. They both felt it in the small, ordinary moments that were quietly becoming extraordinary. Elena had always believed she could face anything alone. Life had taught her to rely on herself, to hide her fears and keep her feelings close. But that evening, everything felt different. She had received news that shook her quietly but completely, a reminder from the past she had tried to forget, something that made her feel small and fragile in a way she hadn't felt in years. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, her hands trembling slightly. Her heart raced, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly overwhelmed. Normally, she would have handled it herself, made a plan, and pushed forward without needing anyone. But tonight, the weight of the news pressed down too heavily. She needed someone, not advice, not solutions, but presence. Her mind went immediately to Marcus. She knew it was unusual, perhaps even impulsive, but she couldn't stop herself from reaching out. She texted him simply, I don't feel okay. Can you come? She didn't expect him to respond so quickly, but within moments his reply appeared. I'm on my way.
Don't move. I'll be there soon.
Elena felt a strange comfort wash over her. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone who would come without hesitation, someone who wouldn't question her feelings or make her justify them. She wrapped herself in a blanket and waited, listening to the distant hum of the city outside her window. A short while later, there was a quiet knock on her door. She opened it to see Marcus standing there, coat damp from the rain, eyes filled with concern. He didn't ask questions, didn't comment on the situation. He simply stepped inside and sat beside her on the bed, his presence calm and steady. Do you want to talk about it? He asked gently, though his gaze never left hers. Elena shook her head slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. Not yet. I just need someone here, please. Marcus nodded. He didn't speak again immediately. He just reached out, placing a hand over hers, a quiet gesture of reassurance. Elena felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the sudden warmth and safety she had almost forgotten existed. For a while they sat like that, in silence, the room filled only with the soft sound of the rain against the window. Elena's thoughts swirled, memories and worries colliding, and for the first time she allowed herself to let them surface. She didn't hide her tears. She didn't try to appear strong. She simply leaned slightly into Marcus, feeling the solid weight of him beside her, a steady presence in the chaos of her emotions. Marcus stayed quiet, offering only gentle touches when necessary, a hand on her back, a reassuring squeeze of her fingers. He had never seen her like this before, vulnerable and exposed, yet she didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to trust him, even in her fear and sadness. After some time, she whispered, almost inaudibly, "Stay with me." The words were fragile, almost trembling, but they carried the depth of her need. Marcus looked at her, his eyes softening. He understood immediately, without hesitation. He leaned closer, wrapping his arms around her and holding her close. His voice was low, steady, almost a growl of sincerity. "Nowhere else I'd be." The weight of his words, combined with the warmth of his embrace, made Elena feel safe in a way she hadn't in years. She let herself rest against him, allowing herself to breathe, to release, to feel the simple comfort of being held without judgment. Time seemed to slow. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, the city's hum distant and muted. In that quiet shared space, Elena realized something profound. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, not when someone cared enough to stay. And Marcus realized that protecting someone didn't always mean solving their problems. Sometimes it simply meant being present, steady, and unwavering. As the night deepened, Elena finally spoke, her voice still soft but stronger than before. I'm scared, she admitted. Of losing control. Of being hurt again. Of everything. Marcus tightened his hold slightly, his thumb brushing over hers. I know, he said gently, and it's okay to be scared. But I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone. She lifted her head slightly, meeting his gaze. There was honesty there, a sincerity that made her chest ache in relief. You really mean that? Every word, he replied, his voice calm but firm. You don't have to face this alone. Not tonight. Not ever if you don't want to. For the first time in a long while, Elena allowed herself to believe him. She let her tears fall without shame, her fears spill out without editing, and in return Marcus simply held her, steady, unshaken. There was no rush, no expectation, no judgment, just presence. Hours passed like this, quiet and safe. They talked in small fragments, sharing stories, fears, and memories, but always gently, never pushing too far. Elena found herself laughing softly at a story Marcus told from his childhood, feeling the tension in her body ease with each shared word. She realized that healing didn't have to be loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, slow, and steady, just like this. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them. Marcus suggested she rest while he stayed nearby. Elena nodded, feeling a strange comfort in his offer. She curled up in the blankets, Marcus still sitting beside her, occasionally brushing a hand against hers to ensure she was okay. The room felt safe, warm, and quiet, a small haven from the weight of the outside world. When sleep finally claimed her, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. She realized that she hadn't needed answers tonight, solutions, or advice. She had simply needed someone to care, someone to be present, and Marcus had done that without hesitation. And in that presence, she had found a sense of connection she hadn't realized she was missing. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft lines across the room. Elena awoke to find Marcus still there, sitting quietly, reading something on his phone. She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up, returning the smile. "Good morning." "How do you feel?" "Better," she admitted, stretching slightly. "Thank you for last night." "You didn't need to thank me," he said, shrugging lightly. "I stayed because I wanted to, because you mattered." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Elena felt her heart swell with gratitude, not just for his actions, but for the way he made her feel, seen, safe, and valued. Over the next few days, their connection deepened in subtle, natural ways. They spent more time together, sharing quiet moments, long walks, and simple conversations that felt meaningful. Elena began to realize that Marcus wasn't just a fleeting presence in her life. He was becoming part of her daily rhythm, a steadying influence she had unconsciously been seeking. Marcus, in turn, found himself thinking about her constantly, noticing the little things she did, the small habits that made her unique. He admired her resilience, her cautious optimism, and the way she gradually allowed herself to open up to him. He knew the bond they were forming wasn't just a passing connection. It was real, grounded in trust, care, and shared moments of vulnerability. One evening, as they walked through a quiet park after dinner, Elena paused and looked at him. "Marcus, I've never felt like this before. Like I can trust someone fully." He smiled softly, brushing a hand over hers. "I know," he said. "And you can. I'll be here. You don't have to face anything alone." She leaned slightly against him, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets. In that moment, she realized how rare and precious this connection was. It wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was about quiet moments, presence, and trust. And it was enough. That night, as they parted, Elena felt a mix of anticipation and calm. She knew challenges would come, that life wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Marcus's presence had shown her that vulnerability could be met with care, that fear could be soothed with trust, and that love didn't always have to be loud. It could be quiet, steady, and real. And deep inside, both Elena and Marcus knew that this moment, the quiet intimacy, the shared vulnerability, was the beginning of something far more meaningful than either of them could have imagined.
Life rarely waited for people to feel ready.
Elena and Marcus had been building their connection slowly, carefully, enjoying quiet moments and the comfort of one another's presence. But as the days went by, real-life pressures began to creep in, testing the fragile balance they had found. For Elena, work had suddenly become overwhelming. A new project at the office demanded long hours and constant attention. Deadlines loomed, emails piled up, and every evening she left feeling exhausted. She wanted to share her frustrations with Marcus, but she hesitated, afraid of burdening him. She didn't want to seem weak or overwhelmed, even though part of her longed to lean on someone she trusted. Marcus, meanwhile, was navigating his own challenges. His younger sister had been struggling with school, and he found himself spending extra hours helping her, managing responsibilities he hadn't anticipated. On top of that, his own work was demanding, leaving him drained by the time he reached the evenings. He wanted to be fully present with Elena, but sometimes life's weight made it difficult. At first, the distance was subtle. Texts that usually came in the evening were delayed. Calls were shorter than usual. Walks and dinners were postponed because of unforeseen obligations. Both of them noticed, but neither said much. They were careful, not wanting to admit that life was pulling them in different directions, even though they could feel the strain growing. One Friday evening, after a particularly long day at work, Elena sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. She had wanted to tell Marcus about the stress she was feeling, but instead, she sent a brief message. "Sorry, I can't meet tonight." Exhausted, she hit send and immediately felt a pang of guilt. She didn't want him to think she was pulling away, but she didn't have the energy to explain herself. The silence that followed made her heart tighten. Marcus saw the message after finishing dinner with his sister. He understood, of course. He had been exhausted himself, but he couldn't help feeling a quiet ache of disappointment. He wanted to be there for her, to ease her stress even just a little, but life had prevented it. He typed a reply. "I understand. Take care of yourself. We'll meet soon." It was a kind and understanding response, but there was a subtle distance in the words that neither of them intended. They both felt it, a faint tension that hadn't existed before. It was uncomfortable, but they didn't address it immediately. The following week, the strain continued. Elena found herself snapping at minor inconveniences, feeling impatient at work, and growing anxious about Marcus's delayed responses. Marcus, in turn, noticed that Elena seemed quieter, more reserved, and he worried that she was withdrawing from him. Both wanted to connect, but neither knew how to bridge the gap that life's demands had created. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Marcus suggested they meet for a short walk. Elena hesitated, her exhaustion weighing heavily on her, but she agreed, knowing they needed to see each other. They met at the park, the familiar path lined with trees glowing softly under the streetlights. For the first few minutes, they walked in silence, both unsure how to begin. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice quiet but tense. I, 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 I feel like we're not connecting lately. Everything is just so busy, and She trailed off, unsure how to continue. Marcus stopped walking and looked at her, concern in his eyes. I know, he said softly. I feel it too. Life has been demanding.
And I hate that it's affecting us.
Elena's shoulders slumped slightly.
I don't want to push you away. I'm tired, and I don't know how to handle it all. Marcus reached out and took her hand gently. You're not pushing me away, he said.
I understand. We're both juggling too much right now.
But we can get through it, together. They walked on, the silence this time feeling less heavy, more reflective. They shared small confessions about their stresses, their fears of not being enough, their worries that life might pull them apart. Speaking aloud, the worries they had been holding inside eased the tension, slowly reconnecting them in ways words alone could not. The next few days became a test of patience and understanding. Elena made a conscious effort to reply to Marcus's texts even when tired. She sent small messages, sharing little moments from her day. A funny conversation with a coworker, the smell of rain on her street, a book she was reading. Marcus responded in kind, giving her small glimpses into his own life, even when exhausted. Yet despite their efforts, small misunderstandings arose. One evening, Marcus had to cancel their dinner plans at the last minute due to a family emergency. Elena felt disappointed, even though she knew the reason was legitimate. Her text to him was curt, and Marcus, reading it, felt a sting of hurt that he hadn't expected. For a moment, both of them considered stepping back, taking a pause. But they didn't. They both realized that this was the reality of life. They couldn't always control circumstances, but they could choose how to handle them. The following day, Marcus arrived at Elena's apartment unannounced, holding 2 cups of coffee from her favorite cafe. She opened the door, surprised to see him, and saw the gentle smile on his face. I know yesterday was rough, he said. I wanted to see you, just be with you for a little while. Elena felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She invited him inside, and they sat together, coffee warming their hands. They talked honestly about the previous night, both apologizing for the hurt caused by tiredness and stress. Marcus admitted that he felt guilty for canceling, and Elena admitted that she had been snappy and unfair.
It's okay, Marcus said gently.
We're human. Life gets messy.
But we care about each other enough to keep trying. That matters more than any small misunderstanding.
Elena nodded, smiling softly. She felt a warmth in her chest, realizing that their bond wasn't just about easy, comfortable moments. It was about facing challenges together, learning patience, and being willing to forgive and understand. Over the next few weeks, they grew stronger as a couple, learning to navigate the everyday pressures that life threw at them. They created small rituals to stay connected, a nightly text before bed, short walks during lunch, weekend mornings spent together at the cafe. Each small effort reinforced their bond, reminding them that love wasn't always grand gestures, but consistency, patience, and care. One rainy Sunday, they walked along the quiet streets of the city, umbrellas in hand. The drizzle was light, the streets reflecting the soft glow of the city lights. Elena laughed as a puddle splashed near her feet, and Marcus instinctively moved closer to shield her. You're always so careful, he teased gently. I know, she replied, smiling. But it's better than getting wet, isn't it? He laughed softly, shaking his head. Maybe, but I think your carefulness is one of the things I like most about you." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that life would always bring challenges, that work, family, and responsibilities could test them. But she also realized that with Marcus, she didn't have to face those challenges alone. Their bond was growing stronger, built not only on comfort and joy, but on understanding, patience, and the willingness to face life's difficulties together. That night, as they parted, Marcus held her hand a little longer than usual. "We'll get through everything," he said softly, "no matter what life throws at us." Elena nodded, feeling a quiet certainty. She trusted him, and she trusted the bond they were building. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't always be easy, but it was real, and that was enough. As she walked into her apartment, Elena reflected on the past weeks. Life had tested them, shown them their weaknesses, and brought moments of doubt, but it had also shown them their strength, their patience, and their commitment to each other. She realized that love wasn't just about the easy moments. It was about navigating the difficult ones and emerging on the other side stronger together. Marcus, meanwhile, returned home with a sense of hope and determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he also knew that the connection they shared was worth every challenge. He thought about Elena's small smiles, her cautious laughter, and the way she allowed herself to be vulnerable. He knew that real love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when life was messy. And in that shared understanding, both Elena and Marcus grew closer, ready to face whatever the future might bring, together. Weeks had passed since the subtle tensions that had tested their bond. Elena and Marcus had learned to navigate the challenges life threw at them. Long hours at work, unexpected family issues, and the quiet, persistent pressure of everyday responsibilities. Through it all, they had grown stronger together, learning patience, understanding, and trust. But one evening brought a challenge that would test their commitment in a way they hadn't anticipated. Elena had been working late at the office, as usual. She was reviewing reports, her eyes tired, her mind full of numbers and deadlines. The office was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights humming softly, when she received a call that made her heart skip. It was her mother, sounding worried and a little shaken.
"Mom, what's wrong?" Elena asked,
concern rising in her chest. "There's been a small accident at home," her mother explained, her voice trembling. "Nothing too serious, but I need you here." Elena felt a knot in her stomach. She knew it wasn't dangerous, but the worry that tightened her chest was undeniable. She tried to focus on calming herself, but her thoughts raced, imagining every possible scenario. She texted Marcus quickly. "Something happened at home. I need to go. Can you, I don't know, just be there with me?" Marcus replied almost immediately. "I'm leaving now. I'll meet you. Don't worry about anything else." The speed of his response, the certainty in his words, brought Elena a small measure of relief. She grabbed her bag, her mind still swirling, and rushed to her car. Marcus was waiting in the parking lot when she arrived. He didn't say anything. He simply opened the door for her, a small gesture that spoke volumes about his care and attention. The drive to her home was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the car engine and the occasional sigh from Elena. Marcus didn't ask questions or try to force conversation. He simply drove, his hand steady on the wheel, eyes occasionally meeting hers with a calm reassurance. She felt a wave of gratitude. He was present, focused, unwavering, just as he had been since the first night she had met him. When they arrived at her house, her mother was waiting at the door, a mixture of worry and relief on her face. Elena rushed inside, checking on her mother and making sure everything was all right. Marcus followed quietly, offering a hand to help carry bags, a calm presence in the midst of small chaos. Once the situation was settled and her mother reassured, Elena stepped outside with Marcus. The evening sky was soft, tinged with pink and gold from the setting sun. The stress of the day weighed heavily on her shoulders, but standing there with Marcus, she felt her tension ease. "I don't know what I would have done without you tonight," she admitted softly, her voice carrying both gratitude and emotion. "You don't have to do anything alone," Marcus said gently, taking her hands in his. "I'll be here, always." Elena looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and quiet strength she had come to trust. For a moment, the world seemed to fade away. The work, the stress, the minor worries that had built over weeks. It was just the two of them, standing together, connected in a way that felt deep and unshakable. "I've been scared," Elena admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Scared that life would pull us apart, that I might lose you. But now I know I can trust you. I trust us." Marcus's gaze softened, and he pulled her into an embrace. "You don't have to be scared," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere, and I don't want you to face anything alone. Not now, not ever." They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, letting the world fade into the background. The quiet intimacy, the shared vulnerability, and the unspoken understanding between them carried more weight than any words could. It was a reassurance, a promise, and a declaration, all at once. Over the following days, Elena and Marcus began to speak more openly about the future. They didn't rush, but they allowed themselves to imagine possibilities. Weekend plans, small trips, and even conversations about life goals began to weave into their daily lives. Each discussion, each shared moment, strengthened their bond and built a sense of certainty and stability. One evening they went for a walk along the river. The city lights reflected on the calm water, creating patterns that danced gently across the surface. The air was cool and quiet, and for the first time in a long while, Elena felt entirely present, entirely at peace. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly, her eyes on the water. Marcus nodded, his gaze following hers. "I do, and I think about us, about how I want to face whatever comes next, with you." Elena turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips.
"I've never felt like this before," she admitted, "like I can really
Trust someone completely, and it feels, right. It does," Marcus said quietly. "It feels real, and real is worth holding on to." They walked in silence for a while, letting the moment sink in. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures. The quiet understanding, the shared smiles, and the gentle touches were enough. They had faced challenges together, supported each other through fear and stress, and grown stronger in the process. Later that night, as they sat on Elena's balcony with cups of tea, Marcus took her hand in his. "Elena, I know life isn't perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes unfair. But I also know that I want to face it all with you. No matter what happens, I want us to be together." Elena's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so long guarding herself, afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to trust someone fully. But in that moment, she felt the walls she had built crumble gently. "I want that too," she whispered. "I don't want to face life alone anymore." They leaned in closer, sharing a quiet, meaningful embrace. It wasn't about passion or drama. It was about presence, trust, and the simple certainty that they belonged to each other in a way that was steady and real. The following weeks were filled with small, ordinary moments that carried extraordinary meaning. They cooked together, walked through the city streets, shared quiet laughter, and held each other through moments of stress or worry. Each day they learned more about one another, not just the easy parts, but the challenging, imperfect aspects of life. And each day their bond grew deeper, stronger, and more resilient. One evening, Marcus suggested they take a small trip to a nearby town for the weekend. Elena agreed, feeling a sense of excitement and calm she hadn't known in years. The trip was simple: quiet walks, shared meals, and long conversations, but it felt like a turning point. They realized that love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about trust, patience, and the willingness to be present for each other, even when life was messy. On the last night of the trip, they sat on a bench overlooking a small lake, the water reflecting the moonlight. Elena rested her head on Marcus's shoulder, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she said softly. Marcus wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "It can," he replied gently. "If you find the right person to share it with, life doesn't feel so heavy anymore." Elena smiled, closing her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely safe, completely understood, and completely at peace. She had faced fear, stress, and uncertainty, but she had never felt alone. Marcus had shown her that love wasn't always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and unwavering. As they watched the moonlight dance on the water, Elena realized that life would continue to bring challenges. Work, family, and unexpected events would always exist. But now she knew something vital. She didn't have to face those challenges alone. They had built a bond that could weather storms, a connection based on trust, care, and mutual respect. Marcus, too, felt a deep sense of clarity. He had found someone who understood him, someone who could share both the joys and burdens of life without judgment. Together they were stronger, braver, and more hopeful than either had been alone. And in that quiet, perfect moment, as the night wrapped around them and the city hummed softly in the distance, Elena and Marcus knew the truth. Love didn't have to be dramatic to be real. It didn't have to be perfect to last. All it needed was trust, patience, and the willingness to stay with each other through the ordinary, the messy, and the beautiful moments of life. They sat together in silence, holding hands, hearts aligned, feeling the quiet certainty that they had chosen each other, and that choice would carry them forward, no matter what the future held.